Here we are at the end of 2024, definitely hard for me to believe as this year has absolutely flown by. Between starting this YouTube channel, being a dad, and all the other things going on in the crazy world, it's been a wild ride. Handheld gaming has been so important to me for this year because it's one of the few ways I can steal some time for myself and unwind for just a few spare minutes here and there. And with that, I wanted to look back on this year and reflect on some of my favorite handhelds I was able to spend some time playing this year. I'm not presenting any kind of ranked list here, so these are in no specific order. Rather, I wanted to focus on just a handful of categories. Most of these devices released this year, but I'm not necessarily making a rule that they have to be picked from this year's releases. Also, these have to be devices I've actually used, and there's plenty of devices that came out this year that I did not buy, so I apologize if your favorite handheld didn't make it to the cut on this list. The categories are the best budget handheld under $100, the best pocket handheld, the best Android handheld around $200, the best PC handheld, my biggest disappointment, and the most surprising or innovative handheld. Without further ado, let's get started. First up, best under $100. Admittedly, with the pace of devices coming out this year, I haven't spent as much time with this one as I should, but I think this handheld embodies everything that's important in a budget handheld. And that handheld is the Anbernic RG Cube XX. For less than $100, you get a comfy ergonomics, pretty good buttons and D-pad, and a great crisp screen. I think it's a great entry point into the hobby, or a great jack-of-all-trades device that's small enough to be tossed into a bag without taking up much space. It's too big to hit the pocketable category, but it's just big enough to be more comfortable to hold than anything else deemed pocketable as far as I'm concerned. And with that, let's jump straight into category number 2, and that is my favorite pocket handheld of 2024. So this one was a late addition and one that I had originally been excited for, but as the year went on and handheld after handheld released, I got a little burnt out on compact Linux-based handhelds. I'm sure many of you in the scene have felt a similar sort of fatigue at just the crazy pace of releases, especially from Anbernic that we've seen this year. Many of them in a vacuum are just fine, but a case of options paralysis and exhaustion presents itself here. I was starting to dread doing a review on this as I approached this handheld getting delivered, thinking, how could I be excited for yet another one of these? And then I opened up the box and I picked up the Trim UI brick. Immediately, I felt that it was nice, sleek, and solid, and I started to get a little bit more excited to review it. I powered it up and bam, the screen just sold me almost instantly. I am someone who is obsessed with high PPI displays, and this one is no slouch. The graphics are super crisp and vivid, and despite being about 0.3 inches smaller than its pocket vertical peers, the quality I think mostly makes up for that size difference. Combined with performance that's plenty for the types of systems that make sense on a stickless vertical, I don't have too much to complain about other than a needlessly complicated UI and a D-pad that's slightly sharp on the edges for me. As I mentioned in my review, however, the MinUI custom firmware easily seals the deal and makes it super seamless and an easy to use experience, a vast improvement on the stock UI in my personal opinion. I think this is an easy to recommend handheld for someone that just wants a sleek pocket device as an everyday carry type situation. Next up, we've got the best all-around Android device for about $200. I think the pick for this category is going to surprise nobody that follows the retro handheld scene unless you've been living underneath a rock. So just going to get straight to the point on this one. It is the Retroid Pocket 5. I cannot really think of another handheld that offers this much performance for this value. Yes, the Odin 2 line of products exists and has more power for those of you who want to do more Switch emulation and the like, but the RP5 coming in at just $220 while having a 5.5-inch 1080p OLED and the Snapdragon 865 processor, which is capable of playing the majority of the GameCube and PS2 catalogs at a minimum of a 2x upscale, is such a unicorn combo for me. In my opinion, this is the first handheld we've seen sub $300 that actually does a good job of these consoles. Yes, there have been other devices technically capable of PS2 and GameCube that use the T618, the G99, or the T820 chips, but none of those play PS2 and or GameCube at a level that I find acceptable, which is to say everything running at least 1x and preferably at 2x resolution. I know these games were played on a potato CRT back in the day, but on these sharp high-res displays, I just don't think the original resolution looks good at all. In fact, it probably looks worse than it would if you played it on a CRT. Now, the RP5 isn't perfect. Its ergonomics are only mediocre. It's hard to play dual stick games, especially if you want to use the analog triggers without doing some sort of weird supporting of the device with your pinkies or your ring fingers. And The face buttons here are just okay, but it mostly makes up for it in sheer performance to price and by having a really awesome screen. There's really never been a better time to buy a handheld for those 6th generation consoles, as this one has a pretty great formula going on for it. Maybe now the just buy a Steam Deck bros will quiet down just a teeny tiny bit. Now, as far as PC handhelds go, since these don't release at quite the pace of Android and Linux, I'm not going to focus on just this year's releases. We did get a few notable releases this year, first and foremost the Ally X and the MSI Claw, but also a few refreshes from brands like Ioneo, One X Player, and GPD. However, I'm going to reach into the list of devices that released last year in 2023 for my favorites on this list today. You might be surprised that the Ally X nor the Steam Deck OLED are my top picks. I actually only owned the Ally X for about 1 week before I returned it to Best Buy. Ultimately, I decided the upgrades just weren't enough to replace the original Z1 Extreme Ally that I already had at that time. The ergonomics did improve, but it was not really enough for me, and with the added weight, the X just didn't quite do it for me. That's a personal take because I really prefer a lighter handheld. I also recently picked up a Steam Deck OLED for the second time, but mostly just so I could do review stuff for this channel. I'm just not a big fan of the 800p display. I know that it's probably the best option for many people, but we're talking about my personal favorites this year, and that was not at the top of the list. So as I just mentioned, I started out this year with the Z1 Extreme as my main PC handheld, but I always had issues with the comfort and those bottom corners digging into my palms. No matter how I held it, no matter how many 3D printed grips I tried, I just couldn't quite get the ergonomics just right for me. And I'm a little picky about that, which always kept my experience from being as good as it could be, which leads me to my runner-up PC handheld for the year, the One X Player, One X Fly. Now this is a very personal pick. At the new prices, this probably isn't a PC handheld most people would consider. I personally picked it up used, so the price tag wasn't quite as offensive, but ultimately the reason I picked this up is just how light and compact it is. As far as I know, I think it's the smallest 7-inch PC handheld that's not a clamshell. I think only the Win Mini is smaller and lighter while still being 7-inch, but that one really didn't do it for me. And at just under 600 grams of weight, and with these rounded grips here, I found this handheld one that I could play for longer stretches than the Ally, while still having a 7-inch 120Hz screen. It doesn't have VRR, but I was willing to forego that in favor of ergonomics that were better for me, and the fact that the model I own has 32 gigabytes of RAM is also very nice, not having to worry about newer games being limited by available RAM. You can just turn the VRAM allocation right up and still have plenty of RAM left over for the system. However, in the 11th hour this year, I think one handheld has dethroned the others for me, and this pick surprised even myself. At the end of the day, I really value a very colorful, vibrant, crisp, sharp, and large screen. I like being immersed into the game I'm playing, and one handheld for me delivers that more than others, and that is the Lenovo Legion Go. This might not surprise you if you saw my video a couple weeks back about the 4 reasons that I picked up the Legion Go again, but this handheld certainly isn't without its compromises. Still, I am really enjoying it again. A big piece is these 3D printed grips that have really helped some of my ergonomic issues with the relatively sharp edges at the bottom of the controllers, as well as just how good Bazzite runs on the go, giving me that Steam Deck-like experience. But the main reason is really just this screen. I'm really not exaggerating when I say the colors on the Legion Go screen look near OLED in how vivid and crisp they appear. I have a Steam Deck OLED that I picked up again recently, and I still find myself reaching for the Legion Go, because even though it doesn't have those deep blacks of OLED, the display is much crisper and more immersive, and it's just as good with being colorful. This past week, I've been playing a lot of Marvel Rivals on it, either locally or streamed from my desktop using Moonlight, as well as all of the Vampire Survivors clones and roguelites that I adore playing on my handheld PCs. So for now, this is my pick despite its flaws, because I just love this screen. And now moving on to potentially the one negative category on my list today, and that is the biggest personal disappointment. This is a hard one and possibly a controversial take, but this is a category awarded to the handheld that I had tons of hype for. I pre-ordered it, and then after I received it and that initial honeymoon period wore off, the device just did not live up to my expectations. Again, this is a very personal pick, but that device is the Retroid Pocket Mini. The device is super awesome on paper, a chip with enough power to comfortably play a good amount of the PS2 and GameCube libraries, an OLED screen, good Hall sticks, the whole package. On paper, totally makes sense. But there's a few reasons this one fell short for me. The first was the face buttons in my video review over on the Retro Handhelds channel. I spent a good chunk of time complaining about the noise and the feel of the buttons. They're quite annoying to listen to, and I just didn't like how the actuation felt. They had too much travel, and it just wasn't smooth enough. But honestly, the bigger reason is Retroid's own self-cannibalization. The Retroid Pocket 5 is better in pretty much every way from the Mini, while not being that much more expensive. It has better buttons and a bigger screen, and it's really not that much bigger of a device. And I wouldn't really put either in a pocket anyways, so just tossing in a bag, no big deal. There's also the fact that the screen resolution on the RP Mini still has not been fixed, which is that the device is outputting slightly less vertical lines of resolution than the display and scaling it up, so it can cause issues when using shaders in retro games. Retroid is aware of the issue and supposedly working on a fix for it, but at the time of this video recording, it has not been updated quite yet. Maybe this device being a disappointment is a byproduct of me being way too much of a consumer and doing this review thing and playing so many other devices, but I think if someone asks me what handheld should I spend the $200 I have on for a new handheld, there might be a better option than the RP Mini, depending on what that person is looking for. And I really did not like the face buttons on the RP Mini. In fact, I actually don't have it in hand here on the video because I already sold mine because I wanted the money for other shiny handhelds to play around with and review, and the buttons just weren't doing it for me. So I said, sayonara Retroid Pocket Mini. And the final category today is the most innovative or surprising handheld. This next device gets a spot on the list, mostly for being a device I didn't think I'd care about that much, but actually turned out to be pretty damn cool. Most innovative might be a little bit too strong, but it certainly offers something that no other handheld on the market right now does, and that device is the Aya Neo Pocket DMG. That's right, the expensive, overpowered Game Boy. Maybe it's because when I was a kid, the Game Boy DMG was my first handheld. It doesn't make a lot of sense to put a top tier chip in a vertical with a medium sized screen, but I'll be damned if it is not fun. The OLED screen on this makes all retro games pop, and even though it's an odd, nearly square aspect ratio, 4:3 content, it's still about the same 3.7 inches that you'll find on the Retroid Pocket Mini, and just a hair larger than your typical 3.5-inch Linux handhelds like the Miyu Mini or the RG35XX series. It doesn't have a right joystick, and the left joystick sticking out a little bit keeps it from being really a pocketable device, but I actually don't hate the control situation. Most, or maybe I should just say a lot, of the games from the PS2 and GameCube era did not really use the right stick a ton. There's plenty of games where the camera kind of auto follows you and you just use the left stick, or maybe the right stick is just for some minor view adjustments, and in that case, the touchpad on this thing does work in a pinch for those kind of adjustments. But this big D-pad and these rounded face buttons with their membrane style just scream retro to me, and they feel really great to play on. And those are what's most important, I think, for a lot of those older games. As I mentioned in my review, this is one where I thought I would do just a couple videos on it and then sell it to recoup most of my losses and help fund other toys to play with. But I am strongly considering making this a permanent, for now at least, I have a little bit of an addiction, part of my collection. This might be shocking, but I have actually been using this handheld over the Retroid Pocket 5 this last week. Maybe it's just the honeymoon period because I just got the DMG in my hands not too long ago, but it really is a pretty neat package. Okay, now go down in the comments and comment once again about how Aya Neo is too expensive and that I should just buy an Odin 2 or Steam Deck. Oh wait. Okay, that out of the way, no, this isn't an everybody handheld, but it is a me handheld. If you want this, you know who you are. And that's it. That's my top list for 2024. It's not exhaustive, and I didn't experience or rate every single handheld of 24 when making these choices, but I do look at and research every new release, even if I don't end up buying them. There's only one handheld on this list I was sent for a review, and that was the Trim UI Brick, and I was planning on buying this one anyway. In fact, I might even buy one of the new indigo or red ones that are about to release. I think they just started shipping. For the rest, I was a consumer, just like all of you, making decisions on what to spend my money on, and this is where I ended up. Let me know in the comments if my picks are great. Don't let me know in the comments if my picks are terrible, and either way, leave a like. If you enjoyed this video and you haven't already, consider subscribing, as I'm still a small-time YouTuber and every little bit helps and is appreciated. I'm excited for all of the handhelds 2025 will bring. It looks like we're getting lots of OLED, and I am personally here for it. So, thanks for watching and have a great holiday season.